They say the wild knows only one law of survival. The strong live, the weak fade. But one frozen morning in Montana, something broke that rule. A small bobcat stepped between a starving wolf pack and their prey. Then came a sound, a fragile cry, that made killers stop, watching from the ridge. A lone photographer realized he wasn't seeing a hunt. He was witnessing a miracle when mercy, not strength, ruled the wild. The morning felt hollow, as if the forest were holding a breath it couldn't release. Snow tufted every branch and glacier, softening edges into hush. Luke Harper moved slow, boots whispering. Through the birch stems, a flicker of pale, tawny fur slid between shadows. A bobcat, small, deliberate, almost weightless, the kind of presence you notice only after it has noticed you. She paused on a ledge of wind-scoured ice, whiskers trembling, ears cupped to the hush. Frost dusted her coat like salt. The light glanced off amber eyes that never blinked long. Luke lowered the camera and just listened. Beneath the stillness, he heard the forest's low machinery sat, groaning in frozen wood. The soft tick of settling snow, the far hush of water under ice. The cat scooped her paw, testing crust, then stepped down into a hollow where storm-fallen limbs made a ragged shelter. She moved with the careful grace of something guarding more than itself. Luke felt it before he understood it. The space around her held a secret. Tracks told the rest, tiny commas stippled in powder, weaving from root to root, vanishing into brush, like a breath caught mid-air. He set one knee in the snow, keeping distance, lens unfocused, so the moment could be whole. The bobcat tilted her head, reading him with the cool arithmetic of the wild. She didn't flare or flee, she simply catalogued. Shape, scent, stillness, a slow trust, not given to men who hurry. Luke eased a glove off, the cold bit quick, clean, as if to warn him what belonging costs. A ribbon of wind slipped through the hollow, and the cat's coat lifted in tiny waves. He counted heartbeats out of old habit, a war reporter's way of measuring seconds when seconds mattered. She slipped beneath the tangle, then reappeared with her chin dusted white. The tiniest sound came after soft, dry questioning. Not a cry, exactly, more like a thread tugging the world toward itself. Luke traced the ground with his eyes. Under the branch litter, snow had been tamped into a shallow, careful bowl. The bobcat slid into it sideways, curling herself along the curve, the way river water settles into stone. Her tail tip twitched once, twice, then went still. The forest leaned closer. Luke did, too, guilt tugging at his curiosity like a sleeve he should not hold. Far upslope, a crow crackled and went quiet. The air changed in those small ways. Winter air can less blue, more iron. The bobcat's ears pinned and pivoted, catching a rhythm Luke felt in his ribs a beat later. Heavy, deliberate compressions in the snow, far but coming. He tasted metal in the cold and thought of maps, routes, exits. The lens stayed down. His breath found the long, slow shape of patience. She rose half an inch, muscles drawn fine as threadwork under fur, and stared into trees crowded with grey. Whatever moved out there moved with confidence enough not to hide. Luke eyed the slope. No dead ground, no cover worth the name. He shifted his weight and froze, not wanting his choice to become hers. The bobcat hovered between fear and duty, anchored by something under those branches. When the wind fell, silence pooled like water in a rutted road. The bobcat eased back into the hollow, pressing her chest to the bowl as if to warm it by memory alone. Luke felt his reason argue with his faith in the wild. Keep out, let be. He swallowed that lesson because he believed it, even when belief hurt. The forest carries its own promises. The forest keeps its own accounts. Snow began again, fine as sifted flour, softening prints into rumour. Luke slid the camera up and framed nothing in particular, the margin where light quit, the drift where it began again. The bobcat blinked, slow, unafraid, a queen of small territories. Over her shoulder, a tuft of brush shivered without wind, the faintest mew threaded out, so thin it felt imagined until feeling became sound. The sound unravelled Luke just a little. He pictured a kit the size of his palm, blind to everything but warmth and milk. He pictured hunger moving through trees on broad paws that never questioned hunger. He had learned to let the wild be wild. He had learned, also, that knowledge carries weight like wet wool. The bobcat angled her body, making herself into a wall that breath could not cross. From the ridge, a low chorus rolled distant, braided, serious. Wolves, not near, not far. The bobcat did not flinch. She lifted her chin and set it down, decision sealed in that small gesture. Luke remembered that some borders aren't marked by teeth or scars, but by a mother deciding the shape of her courage. He let out the breath he'd been hoarding and tasted pine, cold, and old fear. The light thinned further, glassy and blue. Snow found his collar and melted there, a cold finger on the spine. The bobcat's tail wrapped tighter, a loop closing. The kit made that thread of sound again, stronger now, as if practicing the syllable of living. Luke smiled without meaning to, and the forest noticed, and the moment did not break. The ridge held its counsel. The hollow held its heat. When the wolves sang again, the notes braided closer. Luke did not move, neither did she. Between them lay a shallow bowl and a promise. Winter pressed down, and the world narrowed to breath, to listening, to not ruining what might survive. Somewhere below language, he understood the law of this place. You earn the right to stay by staying gentle. He kept still, and the snow kept falling. Snow sifted all afternoon, patient as ash. The bobcat held the hollow like a secret she'd sworn to keep. Her whiskers wrote tiny tremors in the air, while the kit pressed its face to her belly, kneading, finding milk by memory. Luke stayed a breath past the tree line, letting cold soak his sleeves, letting the moment settle without splitting it open. The forest hummed low, as if tuning itself. She rose to turn the kit, and the world tilted with her, a small tide of fur and heat. Under the lattice of fallen limbs, she tested each draft with her nose, fixed the places where wind leaked. Her shoulders carried a quiet arithmetic. How much warmth, how much time, how far to run if running became the only language left. Luke watched the math resolve across muscle and bone. A raven muttered overhead and went silent. The kind of silence that points somewhere. The bobcat's ears climbed, then flattened. She looked up slope, not with panic, but with the cool, ancestral calm of a mother who has already decided where to spend her fear. The kit chirped, milk drunk, tiny paws flexing. She lowered her head and breathed across its crown until the sound shrank back to sleep. Luke radioed once, soft, to Abby, a whisper sucked thin by snow. He kept his eyes on the hollow. Den located, bobcat female with one kit. Wolves heard North Ridge. He didn't ask for orders. He wanted the words on record, like leaving a note on a table you might not make it back to. Abby's voice came back steady as pine. Copy. Keep distance. Let her choose. The slope answered with weight. Not footsteps, yet pressure. A slow bending of quiet. The bobcat rose to half height, tail line tightening, shoulders drawing a small doorway around the kit. Her breath fogged and vanished. Luke lowered his lens. He thought of thresholds he had crossed in other winters, and how some doors never shut the same way once you touch them. A shadow thickened between spruces, then broke into 3, then 5. Wolves, grey as weather that means it. They moved the way cold moves without hurry, without doubt. The bobcat did not hiss or waste sound, she gathered. The kit felt the change and tried to climb her, claws snagging lightly at her fur. She absorbed a small pain and did not move. They fanned across the hillside, reading the basin, reading the wind. One paused, head high, tasting invisibles. The bobcat leaned forward, chin low, putting her throat between the kit and the wider world, like a lock laid over a door. Luke felt his heart go off metronome, remembered to breathe in long ropes so the breath wouldn't shine. The lead wolf cut a line toward the hollow, then checked, as if the snow itself had reached up and pressed a palm to his chest. The bobcat made a sound so thin it barely qualified as sound, a thread pulled through cloth. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't surrender, it was a chord with only one note. Not this life, not this one. The kit lifted its face, and the note tightened into light. For a count of 8 heartbeats, the wolves forgot their math. They stared at a small bowl of snow and the animal who had become its wall. Luke felt the forest lean on its elbows to see better. Wind shifted a fraction, and the den's heat laid a faint, warm hand on the air. The lead wolf blinked, almost curious, and set his foot down softer than before. The bobcat did not give ground. She let the kit crawl to the warm place beneath her chest, and, without looking away, adjusted by the width of a whisker. The gesture was so precise, it scolded the world for being clumsy. Luke thought of all the loud mercies humans try, and how this quiet one, unadorned, felt truer than any speech he could make with hands or law. Snow thickened, blurring edges, making distances confusing. The wolves drifted, not leaving, not closing, caught in a hesitation that had a mother's cry stitched through it. The kit issued one more fragile syllable of life. The bobcat echoed it with breath, not voice, a blessing pressed directly to the place where warmth begins. The paws held like glass. A crow cracked the sky, and the spell loosened. The lead wolf lifted his muzzle to the ridge, measuring some private ledger of risk and promise. He drew a neat arc away from the hollow, and the others wrote their steps inside his. Not retreat, not defeat, just a recalculation that left the bowl of snow untouched. The hillside exhaled. Luke felt the math unclench. The bobcat waited another full minute before she let her body unstring. She checked the kit with swift, practiced touches, ear, spine, belly, then curled them closer, making Winter smaller. Luke eased a glove back on, the wool rough like waking. He lifted the camera and took nothing, choosing instead to keep the image where warmth doesn't leak. Dusk fell in a blue that felt like forgiveness. The spruce drank the last light, and the hollow glowed the way memory glows when you hold it right. The bobcat breathed the kit to sleep and, for a while, slept with it. The rhythm of two small hearts drawing a circle no hunger crossed. On the ridge, wolves sang again, but farther now, their music carrying the night toward other stories. When the first star pinned itself above the dark line of trees, the bobcat woke and listened as if she could hear hours coming. She lifted her head once toward Luke, not to thank him, not to ask, only to include him in the inventory of what had not failed. Then she closed the den with her body, remade the world to the size of her child, and the snow kept falling, soft as breath on a sleeping face. Night settled like ink poured slow, and the hollow learned its new borders. The bobcat kept the kit tucked under her chest, drawing a neat heat around them both. Frost climbed the fallen limbs in glittering scales. Luke held still beyond the spruce veil, a patient smudge of breath, listening for the way darkness changes a plan without saying so. The wind swung north and returned with news. Scent braided through the basin, old blood, wet fur, pine cut open by cold. The bobcat lifted her head an inch, measuring the story inside that smell. The kit stirred, kneaded once, then stilled. Her eyes narrowed to slits of amber. She counted distances the way mothers do, with risk, not yards. Snow began to whisper sideways, tiny grains skittering like thoughts you can't hold. From the ridge came the padded cadence of certainty. Wolves moved in a smoother rhythm than twilight, writing deliberate lines down the slope. The bobcat's tail coiled and uncoiled, a fuse she refused to light. Under her, the kit mouthed air, searching for the next warm idea. Luke heard the pattern tighten. 3 ahead, 2 wide, 1 ghosting the creek bed. He tasted copper the way fear salts the mouth. The bobcat shifted her weight, so the kit slid deeper into fur. She did not blink when a grey shape stitched itself between trunks, her ears aimed, precise as compass needles, finding a hard north. The first wolf showed fully, big-shouldered, scar laid pale across the muzzle. A ledger of winters survived. He halted, and the brush behind him breathed out more bodies. The bobcat's whiskers tremored once, reading their angles, then went still. She did not make herself bigger, she made herself truer, reducing the world to a bowl, a kit, and a spine that would not break. A second wolf dropped low, testing the margin. Snow popped softly beneath his paw, loud as a gavel in that hush. The bobcat opened her mouth without sound, gathering breath the way a violinist gathers bow. The kit squeaked, a thin, bright thread. She moved half an inch, laying her throat over the kit's head, an answer older than maps or names. The lead wolf advanced a step that cost him nothing and made everything smaller. The bobcat's lungs filled and emptied once, twice. Then the sound came, not loud, not long. A cry pulled from the tender place where fear chooses love. It shook as if stitched fast, then steadied, and all the cold air listened because it had to. For a beat, the hill forgot its rules. The wolves paused with snow dusting their backs, eyes glassing with a thought they almost recognized. The cry did not plead, it named. It said, "This life is not fodder for your hunger. It is the last small field my body can fence." Luke felt the sound run through him like a wire strung tight across a canyon. The lead wolf swung his head, not away, but inward, searching whatever ledger lives behind a predator's eyes. He tested the wind again and found milk, heat, the iron of pain, and a boundary no fang could improve. He blinked, something like wonder ghosting the moment, then set his paw down softer, as if the snow might bruise. A junior wolf fainted, youth beating its drum. The bobcat did not flinch. She pressed the kit closer until their breathing layered and became a single pace. Her cry folded into silence, but its shape remained, a bell still ringing after the tone is gone. The junior glanced to the scarred muzzle, waited, and the lesson arrived without teeth. They broke formation, not in panic, but in revision. One by one, the wolves slid into the trees on a curve that honored the hollow. Prints overlapped and blurred under fresh powder, leaving only the impression of a choice remade. Luke let his fingers uncurl from the tripod, a small ache flowering where he'd held on too hard to nothing. The bobcat stayed braced against the world's edge until the hill rewrote itself into quiet. Then, by degrees, she unspooled. She checked the kit the way prayer checks its words, careful, complete. The kit latched and worked, small engine restarting. She closed her eyes halfway, not from relief, but from keeping the moment intact while it cooled. Above them, clouds thinned to reveal a coin of moon, rubbed dull by weather. The spruce muttered and settled. Luke stepped back a pace, giving the hollow back to the dark. The bobcat lifted her chin once toward the place he'd been, acknowledging a witness the way a river acknowledges a stone it flows around. Then she remade the bowl, and the snow resumed its soft, unending work. Morning came thin and pewter, the kind of light that forgets color. The bobcat woke before it, easing out of the hollow to taste the news the night left behind. Her whiskers cut the air. Frost chimed under paw. The kit dreamed against the warm dent she made, feet pedaling softly at ghosts. Luke watched from the tree line, coffee gone cold, choosing silence over certainty. She mapped the basin with her nose, tracing the seam where wind had snuck under the den. A pine had shed ice in the night. Shards lay like broken glass beside the bowl. She carried each away in her teeth, one by one, and rebuilt the lip with patient scoops. The kit mewed and she answered without voice. A pulse of warmth pressed through fur and breath. Far off, wolves wrote new distances, their chorus thinner now, braided with hunger rather than triumph. The bobcat marked that fact, then let it drift. Her work was smaller and more exacting. Keep heat, keep stillness, keep milk moving, keep listening. Luke noted how economy looked like grace when a mother performed it. How nothing wasted was a kind of prayer worth keeping. A wind shift carried a different story, metal and old smoke, human the way river water holds tin. The bobcat froze, body turning to a single listening instrument. Luke felt it too, and scanned the slope until he spotted it. A sprung snare half buried under rime, teeth open and waiting for whatever forgot to look down. He tasted anger and tucked it behind his teeth. He did not move toward it. He could have. He didn't. The law of the wild pressed against the law of men and found no clean seam. The bobcat glanced his way once, then back to the kit, and chose. She took the little one by the nape and lifted, muscle pulling neat and sure, and stepped out of the bowl that had saved them only hours before, refusing old safety now made suspect. Relocation was a sentence written in short words. She carried, set down, listened, carried again. The kit dangled and trusted, swinging like a small lantern under her jaw. Luke walked parallel at a respectful distance, boots whispering on crust, ready to vanish into trees if her ears sharpened. Snow ticked from branches like a slow metronome that would not hurry. Mid-slope, the weather turned its shoulder. Flat flakes thickened into knives. The bobcat hunched to shelter the kit and waited for the white to decide what it wanted. When it eased a notch, she chose a new path, not down toward ease, but across a spine of rock where scent wouldn't pull. Her paws found holds that looked like memory and proved to be stone. A raven shadowed them, curious and unhelpful. A dark notation in the staff of storm. Below, the snare hunched in the blizzard's blur, like a mouth rehearsing a lie. Luke kept his hands out of his pockets, so he wouldn't warm a decision he couldn't keep. The bobcat did not look back. The kit squeaked once, then slept as if the world were steady and had always been true. They reached a windfall shaped like a harp, ribs of spruce leaning into each other. The bobcat slid inside, inspected the dark, and revised it. Snow packed, drafts found and mended. She kneaded the floor until a shallow bowl appeared, then set the kit into that soft equation and curled around it. Outside, the storm remembered its job and started again in earnest. In the tight dark, her breath stitched the air into something that held and would not tear. Luke stood downwind, a dim address among trees, and listened to the storm comb the ridge. He counted to 100 the way soldiers count in bad weather, then lost the thread and let the numbers go. Survival, he realized, sounded like patience more than any other noise most days. Mid-blow, a limb cracked and fell close, thudding the ground into a bell. The kit started. The bobcat rose and turned, placing her body where the fear had landed. She licked the kit's ear once, twice, and the tremor left the small body like a bird leaving a branch. Her tail wrote a slow line over them both, and the den learned that shape has law and simple refuge. When the snow slackened, the world returned in pieces. One cedar, one drift, a single fox track unspooling across a meadow that had been erased at noon. Luke stepped back another few yards, then another, The bobcat watched his retreat without judgment, then lowered her head to the work that never ends. Heat, milk, stillness, ancient chores that keep light alive and near. Evening found the storm spent and the forest reset, edges newly cut, the snare downslope filled with snow and disappeared, which is not the same as gone. The bobcat blinked slow, ears soft now, and closed her body over the kit until the basin held only the sound of 2 breaths. Luke shouldered his pack and left the trees, carrying nothing he hadn't already learned. Dawn came soft, a grey spill of light slipping through fir needles. The bobcat stirred first, shaking frost from her whiskers. Beside her, the kit blinked open 2 new worlds and stared at snow as if seeing silence for the first time. The storm had scraped everything clean. Only the breath of the 2 remained, small ghosts stitched to the air. Luke traced their prints from the ridge, noting how each step of the mother pressed deeper, how the kit's paws drifted and corrected, like commas in an uncertain sentence. The forest had stopped shouting and now only whispered. A raven barked from the far line of pines, and echo made the space sound wider than it was. The world felt paused, not empty. By midday, hunger uncoiled in the hollow. The bobcat watched the wind for scent, body poised between want and warning. She licked the kit's ear once, a promise and an apology, then slipped into the underbrush. The kit waited, eyes following the swing of her tail until it vanished. Then it listened to the silence she left, which was heavier than sound. Luke moved along the tree line, parallel to her path. He had seen this ritual before: leave, stalk, return, but the stakes felt sharper now. Snow muffled his steps, his camera unused at his side. The bobcat crouched under a snag where vole tunnels scored the crust. She waited. The moment was as narrow as breath, the kind where one heartbeat too soon breaks the world. The vole surfaced, quicksilver grey. The strike was clean. She carried it back by the tail, a small offering against the size of hunger. The kit greeted her with a thin squeal that meant both relief and need. She dropped the kill, tore it once, then stepped aside, letting the kit nose clumsily at the warmth. Luke turned away, both reverent and ashamed of the watching. Afternoon light thickened to amber, then thinned again. Far below, human noise scraped the quiet metal clinking, a low laugh. The bobcat froze mid-lick, ears rotating toward the valley. Luke heard it too. He knew that sound snares being checked, rifles unlatched. The memory of old traps in cold blood rose like bile. He cursed softly into his glove. The bobcat slipped low, whiskers cutting the snow's skin. Her eyes flared amber, catching every shift in wind. The kit stumbled behind, small legs punching deep holes. Luke saw the glint of a snare, half buried ahead, and sprinted the slope, waving his arm, voice too human, too loud. The bobcat stopped just short, body trembling with the math of fear and instinct colliding. Then a shot cracked the ridge, short, flat, a note with no echo. Luke dove behind a stump. The bobcat wheeled, pressing herself over the kit. Shards of bark rained between them. One of the hunters shouted. Something moved. The snow replied, only with its steady fall. In that white confusion, mother and kit became a single shape, invisible by will. Seconds dragged their weight into minutes. The men moved off, boots marking ugly wounds in the drifts. Luke rose slow, scanning for blood. The bobcat was gone, ghosted back into timber. Only her paw prints stitched across the clearing toward the old den. The kit's smaller ones swallowed inside them like a child holding a mother's hand. By nightfall, the valley burned gold from campfires below. Smoke braided with pine scent, and the forest's calm returned in cautious degrees. Luke found their den again by accident, breath pluming through the half-light. The bobcat lay curled, flank heaving. He saw a line of red along her shoulder, not deep, but real. The kit slept against her, unhurt. A small heartbeat borrowed from tomorrow. He wanted to move closer, to help, to break the rule that said he shouldn't. But she lifted her head and met his eyes, steady, tired, absolute. The message was clear enough. Witness, not savior. He stepped back into the snow, feeling both absolved and condemned. Above them, the wind shifted east, smelling faintly of thaw. Later, moonlight poured over the ridge like spilled milk. The bobcat licked her wound, slow and methodical, never wincing. The kit stirred once, pressed closer, and the two forms blurred into one shadow. The forest exhaled, counting them among the survivors for another night. Luke watched until the cold pressed through his coat, then turned away, letting darkness take back its own. When morning would come, tracks would tell what courage looked like. One line deep, one light, moving side by side through snow that never stops remembering. But for now, the mountains slept, holding their secret under its white breath, and nothing dared to disturb the quiet that mercy had earned. The forest woke under a bruise-colored sky. Snow had crusted overnight, silvering the valley in quiet armor. The bobcat stretched carefully, her shoulder wound half healed, the kit already pawing at her tail with the impatience of youth. Each breath they shared made a small fog, a reminder that warmth was still negotiable but not yet lost. She left the den at first light, moving slow through the drifts. Her paw left a faint tremor with each step, the limp nearly gone but honest. The kit followed close, still wobbling in its mimicry of grace. The air was sharp enough to cut memory, but she kept her nose on the wind. Hunger had become a dull ache, enduring, constant, like love in old bones. Luke tracked them from above, distant, his outline blurred by the snow's glare. He hadn't seen them for 3 days and had feared the worst. Now, spotting the pair against the whitened slope, something inside him unclenched. He wanted to call out, but the forest wouldn't allow that kind of noise. So he stood and let his silence mean gratitude. The bobcat found an open field of wind-packed snow where mouse tunnels whispered beneath. She crouched, tail twitching, breath slowed to a script older than language. The kit copied clumsily, crouching too high, ears tilting forward. When the pounce came, it was pure instinct hers, not the kit's, and the snow erupted with purpose. 2 quick bites, and hunger bent a little toward peace. The kit crept near, licking frost from her whiskers, and she let it. She even nudged the meat toward him, a gesture rare in nature, teaching, not feeding. Luke's camera clicked once, then stopped. Even sound felt intrusive. He could see how the cub's ribs showed less sharply now, how the mother's wound had turned pale under fur, how the wild heals what it refuses to forget. By afternoon, clouds thickened again, dragging light from the trees. The bobcat caught scent of humans before Luke did. Her ears twitched. The kit froze mid-step. Below, two hunters crossed the frozen creek, rifles slung, laughter bouncing thin as glass. She pressed the kit flat, muscles trembling, and waited for the echo to pass. Luke's stomach tightened. Same men as before. Same careless boots. The kit shifted. A tiny crunch in the snow. The hunters stopped. One turned, squinting toward the hollow. Luke waved his arm from the ridge, a burst of motion meant to draw the eye. "Hey!" His shout cracked the stillness like a stone through ice. Both men spun, startled. One lifted his rifle, then dropped it when recognition replaced threat. "Ranger business," Luke lied. Trails closed. They cursed, muttered, and moved off. The bobcat didn't run. She watched him, head tilted, reading the man who'd just broken her cover to save it. The kit blinked up at her, sensing her pause, the hesitation between distrust and something gentler. Then she turned away, guiding the small body toward deeper woods where human scent couldn't cling. The snow began again, erasing the tension step by step. By dusk, the storm softened, and they found shelter under a wind-fallen cedar. The bobcat curled tight, the kit pressed against her throat. She listened to the mountain's pulse, slow and even. Somewhere far off, wolves sang not threat now, but distance. She closed her eyes. The kit answered the song with a squeak, small and brave, and she licked its head as if to name it courage. Luke camped nearby, fire muted under a tarp. He wrote a single line in his notebook. "Mercy doesn't always look like kindness. Sometimes it's silence at the right time." Then he shut the cover, letting snow settle on his coat. Through the blur of trees, he could still make out their shape, a shadow wrapped around another, surviving in the oldest way possible together. Near midnight, wind slipped through the timber and brushed across her den. The bobcat's eyes opened, golden even in darkness. She lifted her head, scanning the tree line. Luke's firelight flickered faintly. A promise or a goodbye, she couldn't tell. She blinked once, slow, a gesture that translated cleanly between species. "I see you." Then she laid her head back down and slept. When morning came, Luke's campsite was empty, footprints already swallowed by snow. The bobcat rose, stretched, and guided her kit east toward sunlight, into a forest so wide it might never end. Behind them, the cedar closed its shadow, and only the hush remained, the kind of hush that follows a moment no one wants to break. Winter returned like an old letter, edges frayed, message unchanged. Years had thinned the forest's noise. New growth filled the windfalls where storms had spoken. The bobcat moved with the comfort of a map she no longer had to read. Her coat had deepened to bronze, her scars tucked quiet under fur. Beside her, a young Tom, her first shadowed every step with careful awe. They crossed the basin, where the wolves once paused, Prince stitching a familiar hymn across the crust. The bobcat paused at the ridge and listened into the white. Snow carried the tidy smells of rabbit and spruce, and the iron thread of creek water sealed under ice. No danger yet, only the steady arithmetic of winter balancing its own ledgers. Down valley, a single sound cracked the peace metal, clinking metal, then a quick, sharp yelp. The bobcat froze, ears pitched. The young Tom peered past her shoulder, rib cage fluttering with the drum of a new fear. She tasted the air and found human heat cooling and the sour coin of old bait. She knew that flavor. Memory made her jaw go still. She flowed low through alder and stood at the meadow's lip. At the center, a mule deer fawn thrashed, one leg gripped by steel teeth, panic chewing its breath to shreds. Snow around it lay churned and pink. The young Tom crept forward, whiskers strung tight with hunger and confusion. The bobcat lifted one paw to block him, a gate that said, "Not this lesson." Across the meadow, wolves ghosted from the timber, grey poured into motion. They moved with the sober ease of hunger that expects to be answered. The lead dog tilted his head to the wind and found blood and fear and metal. He wrote a line toward the trap without hurry. The meadow gathered itself for the obvious ending it already understood. The young Tom trembled, indecisive between chase and hide. The bobcat stood taller by a breath, her throat working once, twice, as if the old cry had to remember its own door. Snow-tapped leaves, a soft metronome counting down. She stepped past her son into open white, as if entering a room where everyone was talking and none had said the thing that mattered. The wolves checked at that single, unspectacular choice, the way certainty softens when something smaller refuses to make room. The fawn heaved, eyes shocked wide, breath frothing. The lead wolf closed the last distance until the meadow had only this: steel, fear, hunger, and a cat that ought to move but didn't. The young Tom hid his face in her flank and waited for the world to break. The bobcat opened her mouth and let the sound come, not loud, not long. A thin, shaking strand pulled from the place where love stands in front of itself. The note wobbled, then steadied, carrying milk and winter, and the memory of wolves pausing once before. It threaded snow and fur and the gap between hunter and proof. The meadow held still to listen. The lead wolf's eyes changed their work. He tasted what the cry carried: birth and small breath and mornings that almost didn't happen. Behind him, a junior shifted, impatient. The leader glanced back once, a short flick of discipline, then looked again at the bobcat who had made herself into a wall for a life that wasn't hers to keep. Decision cooled like iron left in snow. He stepped aside, not far, not forever, just enough to rewrite the moment's grammar. The others redrew their lines inside his curve, circling windward where scent thinned and steel insulted the ground less. The fawn panted in the sudden slack, bewildered by the miracle of not being finished. The bobcat watched until the wolf's shoulders blurred into trees. Luke saw the ending from the far tree line, a late witness to grace he didn't author. His breath smoked a quiet thank you he'd never speak near a microphone. He couldn't free the trap and shouldn't. not with wolves near and the law louder than his heart, but he could mark the place and return with Abby and a key meant for steel, not prayer. The young Tom crept forward, eyes on the fawn's trembling flank. The bobcat pushed him back, with the weight of her entire body made gentle. Hunger complained. She ignored it, steadying him with the cadence of her breath. The meadow widened again, no longer a page for violence, but something like a room where mercy had taken the chair at the head, and no one argued. Snow thickened, trimming edges, making all tracks briefly equal. The bobcat turned, guiding her son upwind, away from metal and deck. Luke waited until they were gone, then lifted his radio. Words travelled the cold as coordinates, measured and spare. Below, the wolves sang, farther now, their chorus carrying a rumour of restraint through trees that remember everything. At the ridge, the bobcat paused once more, looking back into the white that had tried so many times to close the book on her. She blinked a slow acceptance that never asked for applause. The young Tom brushed his whiskers along her shoulder, kneading the air like it could hold them both up. She set her face to the timber and walked on. Behind them, the snow rewrote the meadow into hush. Morning rose through a gauze of mist, soft and almost shy. The forest seemed to breathe slower, its branches heavy with frost, its silence stitched with faint echoes of what had been. The bobcat moved at the tree line, her coat catching the light in flashes of gold and smoke. Behind her, the young Tom followed, his stride steady now, his curiosity beginning to outgrow fear. They reached the river, where ice still held to the edges, like old promises. The bobcat lowered her head to drink, her reflection bending with the current, older, scarred, resolute. Across the water, Luke Harper stood for the first time in years, boots sunk deep, camera forgotten at his chest. He had returned to the place where the story began, though he wasn't sure what he hoped to find. Wind tugged at his coat, carrying a thin thread of sound, a breath, a memory. He looked up just as the bobcat's eyes found him. For a moment, the space between them held no past and no distance. The young Tom stepped into view, his fur touched by sunlight, his shape a familiar echo of a small life, once almost lost. Luke felt his throat tighten against words that didn't belong here. The bobcat stood still, reading him through the years. There was no fear, no debt, only the quiet understanding of two creatures who had both kept something alive they were not meant to. She blinked once, slow, deliberate, and the gesture travelled across the frozen air like a closing of an old wound. Luke lowered his eyes, then lifted them again, afraid the vision might vanish with breath. The Tom moved forward, paws cautious on the snow. He sniffed the air, curious about the man whose scent lived faintly in his mother's memory. Luke stayed perfectly still. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath again, the same way it had the morning he first saw her under the pine root den. Only now, the silence felt earned, not empty, but complete. When the wind shifted, the Tom startled and darted back, disappearing behind her legs. The bobcat didn't follow him. She turned her head toward the far ridge, where the wolves' song drifted faintly from miles away. The tone was not hunger this time, but distance, a sound of the world continuing exactly as it should. She started walking, her tail brushing snow into soft spirals. Luke watched her go until the forest swallowed the color of her coat. The trail she left was faint, already filling with light snow. He could have followed, but he knew better now. Some stories didn't ask for a second telling. They asked to be left whole. He lifted the camera one last time and took the shot not of the cat, but of the emptiness after her passing. The click startled a crow from the branch above, its wings scattering frost. Luke smiled faintly, pocketed the camera, and whispered to the still air, "She made it." His voice carried no weight beyond the pines, but saying it out loud made it real, like setting a stone gently where it belonged. He turned toward the ridge, his boots sinking deep, the sound of water faint beneath the ice. Above him, the clouds cracked open, letting through a slice of sun. It spilled over the frozen creek, over the prints already fading. For a heartbeat, the clearing shimmered the same kind of light he'd seen once over a den of roots and snow, when life had no reason to survive and did anyway. He closed his eyes and let the brightness burn a shape he could keep. Far in the trees, the bobcat paused, sensing the warmth on her back. She looked toward the open sky, her ears twitching at the faint hum of wind. The tom pressed against her flank, restless, ready for a day he didn't yet understand. She nudged him forward, guiding him toward higher ground where light fell clearer, her steps sure and unhurried. From the ridge, she could see everything, the river curling like a silver thread, the wide valley breathing in blue, the trace of a man walking the opposite direction. For a long while, she watched him go, tail moving in slow rhythm, not in longing, but in recognition. When she turned away, the air shifted again, quiet folding back around her like a home rebuilt. Luke reached the ridge an hour later and looked down to find no sign of her, only the snow unbroken and soft like the closing of a page. He took out his notebook, the same one scarred from storms and years, and wrote a single line beneath the last entry. The wild remembers kindness, even when no one sees it. He left the page open until the ink dried in the cold. As twilight arrived, the mountain exhaled a faint gold mist, the kind that makes every sound softer. The bobcat and her son disappeared into the timber, their prints trailing into the heart of the forest. Luke stood watching until they merged with shadow. Then he whispered, almost smiling, "Go live your life, little one." The wind carried the words, and the snow kept falling. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees.